Let's get started on the grenade, and before we do anything, let's create a new scene collection. And we're going to call that one core, and in here everything for the grenade is going to live. And then we're going to get the basic proportions down by creating a sphere. So Shift A, Mesh, and then we're going to select UV sphere. Set this to 64 each, and location 0, 0, 0. And we're going to set the radius to 0.A3. And if we then take a look at this, go to wireframe mode, you can see this is in the exact right position for this to work. And then let's analyze the shapes that we've got going on. So we have a cylinder in the center, another cylinder that goes around it, and then a third bigger one. That one is actually cut off down here. You can't see the line because there's no bevel on it, because we're using the bevel shader to generate the bevels. And then there actually is another line down here that cuts everything off. So what we're going to do to start out with is create a couple of different pieces for Boolean operations. So a box down here, box here in the middle, and then several cylinders in the center to divide this into its basic components. So let's get started doing that. Let's bring back the base geo and actually set the active cursor to 0, 0, 0. And then we're going to add a new cube. And I'm going to set the pivot to this top face by using the hotkey. And then I'm going to move this to 0, 0, 0. And before we do anything else, we need to move this down to align it where we want the cut to be. So let's go for negative 0.635. And then we can do a Boolean operation. So we can select this and do Control minus. Now, normally you would see a hard ops window down here. And let me actually undo. And in order for the window to show up, the cutter geometry needs to be enabled in the viewport. So let's do this again, Control minus, and now you can see it comes back up again. Actually not sure if this is a bug or intended behavior, but in case you ever run into that, here's how to fix it. And then instead of a difference, we want to do a slash because we want to keep both pieces. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to apply the modifier on both pieces, so that we don't have the Boolean modifier sitting on top of our geo. And then we can also assign the bevel medium blue material, right-click, shade smooth, right-click, shade smooth, turn off the reference images, and if we set this to rendered, you can see we have our first panel line down here that will show up with the bevel shader. So good stuff. Let's do the next cut, and it's just another box that's going to be positioned a little higher. So let's bring back the reference planes and Control F on the side view. And then this needs to be aligned here. So let's add another cube, just like we did before. Set the pivot here, move this down, go to left view, and then see if we can align this, and maybe go with negative 425. That looks like it's right. And then what we're going to do is do another Boolean, and we're going to do another slash. So select the box first, then the object, Control minus, set this to slash, and now we have 3 pieces. And again, we're going to apply our modifiers because I don't want to mess with them afterwards anymore or move those Boolean operations around. So there we go. Let's start looking at these circular shapes. So we're going to do Control F to isolate these guys, and then go to left view. And then we're going to add a cylinder here. So Shift A, Mesh Cylinder. Set this to 128, and then rotate this on the Y-axis, 90 degrees. And then we're going to turn on wireframe and scale this guy down. And we're going to put it into position around right here. It doesn't matter if this is not exact. The reference plane is actually a little bit off, so we can just eyeball it for now, which is totally fine. And then we're going to scale this outward, and we're going to make a duplicate, Shift D, right mouse button to paste in place, and then scale this down again. And this time we're going to go to somewhere around here, and then scale this outward. And I'm also going to make a copy of this front face of this guy. So Shift D, move it out, and then we're gonna P separate by selection. And then we can do our booleans. So this guy, control minus, and then slash, so that both pieces remain. And then we're going to apply the modifier. And then we're going to do a boolean here, control minus, and apply the modifier on this guy. And now this piece comes into play. This fits exactly in here. And if we look at it from the left view, it gives us our base for this shape on the inside. So let's do an inset to somewhere around here and another one to somewhere around here. And then we're gonna move this out, maybe something like that. Turn off wireframe. And then we wanna position this somewhere around here. And let me turn on wireframe. E for extrude, middle mouse button to constrain on the x-axis, and then move this back. And now we have extruded this. You can also turn off the cutters for now so that they're not in the way. And then I want a bit of a smoother transition here. So let me actually bring this back a little bit on the x-axis. So make sure you're using the axis constraints. And then Control B. But actually, before we do that, let's reset the scale. So Control A and then scale. And now we can do Control B and then use our mouse wheel to increase the amount of subdivisions. And maybe we can use something like 8. And press C to turn on constraints. So then we move it all the way out, left mouse button to confirm. And then we're going to merge these vertices because there's a double edge here now. So 1, A to select everything, M, merge by distance, and then now this is not a double edge anymore here. And then I don't like how steep this is, so what we can do is we can change this and just scale it. So let's set the active cursor here. So Shift S to select it, and now the active cursor is here, and then we can use this as the transform pivot. So I'm going to use my hotkey for that, Shift Alt and 4 for me. This sets it to cursor and 3D cursor. And then I'm going to go into vertex mode here and then invert my selection. And now I'm going to scale based on this active on the cursor. So S and then X to constrain on the X axis and just make it a little flatter, something like this. This feels good to me. And lastly, I'm just going to do a bevel here. A little bit of a sharper one. So something around that. And then we can extrude this inward and assign our bevel medium blue material. Control F to bring everything back, Shift 2 to hide our reference images, and you can see that this piece is part of that collection. So let's take this out and move it to core. And now we can set this to rendered and then give it a second to update. And here are our bevels. And this is a little funky because we haven't set up the auto smooth. So right click, shade smooth on all of these pieces. And then also go down here and set up auto smooth, and auto smooth. And now we're getting some really clear and crisp edge bevels, which is great. So let's bring the reference planes back and set this to material preview. And then we're going to work on this inner shape here. So Shift D to duplicate and move it forward, and then E to extrude, grow, P separate by selection. Then we can move that back in. Go to wireframe on this as well. And then we want to select the inner shape and that front face here. Just this guy. And we're going to do an inset, so press I, move this in, roughly match the shape, and move this forward somewhere around here. And then we can do a bevel, something like this. And turn off wireframe. And actually set the pivot here, move this in and snap this. And now we have the base shape for the grenade being done. So all we need to do is mirror this over if we want to. So for now we can just join these two guys and then apply all transformations, and then Alt X to mirror this on the other side, and then apply modifiers. And now we have a perfectly symmetrical face. And this is the area where the detail is going to be, the little metal pieces. And we're also still going to add more detail to all of this. So here are the metal pieces, and then you can see we're going to add a bunch of this stuff and this stuff, but that's all going to come later. For now, we're just going to stick with this. Next, I want to focus on these metal bits up here, and the way that I'm going to create these is using UV deformation and shrink wrapping. And this might sound a little confusing if you've never done it before, but the breakdown of the technique is we're going to create a piece, a target geometry, which is going to be the outer shell of this, and then we're going to divide it up into evenly spaced quads. Then we're going to make a UV layout for it. Then we're going to flatten the UV layout, model the metal bits on top of it, and then we're going to deform back the flat UV layout to the target shape. And by doing that, it will deform the geometry on top of it, making it into the shape of this. In order for this to work, we need evenly spaced quads. And unfortunately, there's no quick way to do that in Blender out of the box. There is a plugin called Quad Remesher from Exercide, and I own it. And I recommend you guys buying it as well. It's around $100, but because it's so expensive, I'm not going to do it with this plugin in this tutorial. I'm going to actually create it from scratch, and that always takes a little bit longer. And I'm going to show you how to do it now. You don't have to do it from scratch. You can always just append the geometry from the kitbash file, but I still want to show you guys how to do that. So the first thing I'm going to do is just duplicate this over and just move it to the side so that we have some space here. And then I'm going to shortest path select and delete these faces. And then what we're going to do is maybe set this to an even value here, something around 5. Yeah, okay, it moved it over here, which is fine. And then we are going to start creating the target geometry. So let's go to the front view, and I want to just set my 3D cursor to here, or we can actually set it to here, and then Shift A, Mesh, and Cylinder. So let's do that. And we're going to rotate that 90 degrees, and 32 subdivisions is fine. And then we're just going to try to match the outline of this. And then an edge here, and then we're going to move this in over here. I'm not going to worry about this side for now. And then center pivot and just center this out so that this geometry matches. And then I want to create a box, so a cube, move this down, go to the front view, set the pivot to here, and then just snap this here. And then we're going to do Boolean between these two pieces. And that looks like it didn't work, so we need to move it over. So Boolean, and then we can do apply modifiers. And now we have a basic piece of geometry, kind of like a shell geometry. And what we're going to do is just mirror this. Actually, let me see where the pivot is. Snap this here, put the pivot here, and then mirror it over. And then we're going to set the 3D cursor down here, Shift S to select it. And then we're going to set our transform to cursor and 3D cursor, and then scale this down. And I'm just trying to match the shape here. And you can see it did it fine, but we need to do it sideways as well. So S, Y, and move this in. And here it's not doing a good job anymore, so I'm just going to manually do that. So what I'm going to do is just select these vertices and kind of like snap them to the closest vertex possible. Something like this. And because I don't want to do it on the other side, I'm just going to mirror it over and apply modifier. And do the same here. And then what I can do is start subdividing this. So we're going to start with one subdivision here. And then we're going to project this to the outer shell using a shrink wrap modifier. So select the base geo, go here, add modifier, and then we're going to choose shrink wrap. And we're going to choose our target geometry, which is the sphere. And once I select it, it will project the geometry onto the target geometry, and it's using the nearest surface point. So you can change the attributes here. I would leave it at either tangent, normal, project, or nearest surface point. That gives me the best result here. So let's leave it at that, and then we're going to apply the modifier right away, and then we can keep working on that. And like I was saying, I want this to be evenly spaced. So I'm going to move this to the right, move this to the left, and here I'm getting some nastiness. So let's just merge the vertices in the middle, and then we're going to use loop tools and flatten, and that should even this out. Loop tools, flatten. Let's try this again. Loop tools, flatten. And then we can actually run this on the whole ring. So let's do this. Loop tools and flatten. And now that I have subdivided it more, what I want to do is keep subdividing it. So one more level of subdivision. And then let's just get rid of this for now, because I only want to do it on one side. And then bring back the original piece of geometry. And do a shrink wrap again. Select our target geometry. And there we go. Let's apply the modifier again. And then I want to clean this up. Move this all to the right so that these lines are all straight and the chords are evenly spaced. And now that I've done that, I can mirror this over again. And we're going to do smart ring, loop tools, flatten. And then we're going to have to do the whole thing one more time. This time we can actually use a subdivision surface, set this to simple, and just do apply. That subdivides everything. And then we can project it again. So add modifier, shrink wrap, select our target geometry, and apply. And now we need to work on this more again. So I want to have this be straight lines like I was saying. And let's see if we can use flatten here as well. That kind of like chooses the middle. So loop tools, flatten. And then same here. Smart ring, loop tools, flatten. And that spaces everything out a bit more nicely, I guess. And let's mirror this over, this side to this side. And now we're having a pretty even base with polygons that are as evenly spaced as we can get it for now. So let's keep going for a little bit longer. I don't like the discrepancy here, so we can just do a smart ring again, and then loop tools space. And one other thing we can do is actually take a look at how closely these surfaces are matching. And it's not too far off. I think I'm going to actually do maybe one more subdivision. So set this to simple, apply. And then what I'm going to do is first we're actually going to mirror this over. So right to the left. And then another shrink wrap. And now we should have some reasonably decent results. Let's do one more cleanup. Smart ring, loop tools, flatten, and then this needs to be in the center. Let's see if it still is. Not entirely, which is fine. Let's get rid of this, put the pivot here. And then we're just going to mirror this over, add modifier, apply modifier. And also see down here, Smart Ring Loop Tools Flatten. That didn't work. Let's see why that didn't work. Maybe I should only do it for these edges down here. Yeah, that's better. And then we can just mirror this over. I think it has troubles with the outer edge loop basically. Yeah, and now we have pretty evenly sized quads on this. It's not perfect, but it's pretty decent and should give us a good result for the deformation. So now that we are done with the geometry, we need to create the UVs. And the UVs are actually going to be super easy to create. So all we need to do is switch this over here to the UV editor. And then we're going to select all of the faces, and we can just press U and do unwrap. And you can see when we do that, we get a pretty uneven unwrap. And my goal is to have each of these quads or each of these faces to be the same size in relationship to one another. And I don't want any distortion. I want this to be a rectangular shape. Now, the way to do it is actually quite easy. So just select one of the quads here in the center, and then we're going to do unwrap on this piece. And then we're going to align all the edges with one another. So here we're going to do Alt-A top, Alt-A right, Alt-A bottom, Alt-A left. And now it's a perfect shape. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go over here again, press A to select everything. And in face mode, make sure that you select the face that we've unwrapped last. And then we can just press U, and then we can do follow active quads. And it's basically going to unwrap everything based on the last selected quad. And then we're going to do that and choose length average, press OK. And then you can see everything is now unwrapped in a rectangular shape, which is exactly what I wanted. But you can see it's actually quite big. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring up text tools over here. And then in the UV layout category, we're just going to click on crop. And that moves this area into the 0 to 1 UV space. So that's it for the UVs. That's all that we needed to do for them. And we can now move on to the next section. Also, if you do want to skip having to create this part, you can just append it to your scene. It is in the kitbash file, so you can go to append. And you can select grenade pattern target geo. So when you bring that in, you will have this piece of geometry in your scene that's already unwrapped that you can use if you don't want to have to recreate it from scratch. Let's bring in the geometry that we are going to deform into this shape. So we're going to click on append again, and then look for grenade pattern. And once we have that, you can see it shows up here, and we can just move this over, center pivot on it, and then take a look at what this geometry looks like. It's actually a pretty simple geometry. It's literally just a box with beveled edges, rotated 45 degrees, and then a little bit of an inset on top. And then I did some Boolean operations here. And then I've also created a frame for it that just follows the outline. And then another thing I did was I divided everything up evenly so that when we deform this piece of geometry, it has enough resolution so that it can support some deformation. Like imagine if we were trying to bend this and there were no subdivisions on here, we wouldn't get a smooth shape, it would be very faceted. And by adding these edges everywhere and making sure that they're evenly distributed, we will make sure that this bends nicely. And what we're going to do is we're going to now create a piece of geometry based on the UV coordinates. And I'm going to use text tools for that. So just select text tools in here. And then under mesh texture down here, all we need to do is click on create UV mesh. And this is going to take a while to calculate because it's a pretty heavy operation apparently. And what's going to happen is this piece of UV coordinates will be converted into 3D geometry. And if you think about it, that's really all what UV coordinates are. They are a 2D representation of the 3D mesh. And we can morph back the UV coordinates into the 3D shape. And what we're going to do is we're going to basically attach these two pieces here together. And then we're going to deform this back into this shape. And by doing so, this shape is going to deform this shape. And hopefully by now at this point, it's becomes a little bit more clear why we needed to create pretty evenly distributed UV coordinates for this. Imagine if we had a wonky shape here or some curves on the side, it would be really hard to match these two shapes. So when you want to use this technique, make sure that you have an outline that's easy to trace, and make sure that these UVs are like evenly distributed and your quads are evenly distributed, so that when you deform it, it doesn't deform the geometry too much and it doesn't skew the details and stuff. Now, before we can do it, we need to align these two pieces. So let's just hide that, put the pivot here, and then we're going to set this to global and median point again. Press G, snap this here, go to rotate mode, rotate that 90 degrees, press G again, move it over and snap it here, and then make sure it's aligned this way where this edge is aligned with this. And then we're going to go into top view and use a lattice to match the outline of this. So quick lattice, which we can find here, quick lattice. And now we have a lattice shape, and I can just select the vertices here, press G, middle mouse button to constrain on this axis, hold down Control to vertex snap here, do the same down here, press G, middle mouse button, hold down Control and snap it here. And now that we're done, we can go in here and actually apply the lattice modifier and also get rid of the lattice group because we don't need that anymore. So this worked out really well. You can see we can move this over and these shapes are perfectly overlapping. They have the same dimensions, which is exactly what I want. And let's bring back the geo. And in the next step, what we're going to do is we're going to morph this back to here. And it's super easy. All you have to do is select the geometry you want to deform and then select the UV geometry. And once you do that, you will see in here, this button will become available. And then all you need to do is press wrap. So click it, and then it deforms the geometry. And right now it looks like nothing really happened, but in here is actually our target geometry. So if we hide this piece, you can see that our pattern geometry has been deformed and is now matching that shape perfectly. And look how nice this actually worked out. Like it deformed almost perfectly. There are a few errors here that we can fix later on, but it's looking really, really good. So having to model this by hand is like barely possible. You need to use this technique where you rely on the UV coordinates or use deformers or something like that. But I prefer doing it this way because it gives you so much more control over the shape that you actually want to create. Okay, now that we have this, we can apply the surface deform modifier here and then press G to move this over. And then actually press Alt S to center pivot. Go to top view, and then we can just snap this here to the center. And let's actually delete this piece of geometry because we don't need it anymore. And also I don't need any of this stuff anymore. So we can just go through here and delete all of this. And right now you can see my pattern is in the reference planes collection. So we want to move that to the core collection. And then we can hide the reference planes collection and just look at this geometry. Let's assign the bevel material to it. And let's actually set this to rendered view and see what this looks like. And we're getting a nice bevel on this. We're losing a bit of sharpness because these pieces are all one piece of geometry. And if it's one piece of geometry, the bevel shader blends between the corners. If we don't want that to happen, what we can do is we can separate the pieces out from one another. So just select one piece and press P and then separate by loose parts. And now you can see we're getting a better bevel between the pieces, but it's still not perfect because the bevel is a little big. So let's just go to the shader editor real quick and set this to maybe something like 0.02. See what that looks like. And that's giving us a much nicer result. Like, see how nice the bevel looks. It looks like it's a perfect high poly mesh, no distortion, everything looks really great. We can also add a light really quick, just to show off the bevel even more. Set this to 100 watts or something. And there you go, it's looking really good. And we're going to do way more tweaks later on to the material so that we get variation in bevel width, and this looks a little bit nicer. But it just shows you the power of this, the bevel shader. We're just going to bake it down. There's no need for an actual high poly. This is all we need to get like good details on it. So I'm going to get rid of the light, go back to solid mode, and actually maybe crank this back up to 0.035. And I also want to merge these pieces back together, just so that I don't have these hundreds of pieces laying in my scene. I want this to be one object. So Control J to join, and now this is one object again. And yeah, there we go. So I want to do a little bit of cleanup on this bevel down here. You can kind of see that this is not that nice down here. So what we're going to do is just go to front view, go to vertex mode, deselect all of this, and then Alt A, and just align this to the top. And that gives us a straight line. And then now we have to double press G on these guys and just move this up and kind of like even out the details here. Sometimes with this deformation it moves vertices around a little bit too much, but now we have a pretty perfect edge. There's not much we need to do here now. And obviously you can experiment with using different patterns, different shapes. I just gave you this one I created, and I didn't want you guys to have to go through creating these like super simple patterns, because there's really not much to it. It's just going to cost you a bunch of time. So I just thought I'd give you the pattern and you can just use it. If you want to use a different one, if you want to design your own one, just use the UV layout as a template, model on top of it, and then deform it into this shape. But I'm really liking this look with these metal bits that would fly away if the grenade explodes. So there we go. Now we're at a point where we can do more details on this object. Let's look at our reference planes again and identify the stuff that we still need to do. So you can see we have these round circular bits here that I want to add to my model. So maybe let's do these guys next. Simple stuff. We're going to start with a cylinder again. So mesh cylinder, and move this over to 0, 0, 0, and then rotate that on the y-axis 90 degrees. And go to wireframe view, scale this down, move this into position here, scale this down again. And let's see what we can do here. And let's bring back our original geo and just move this forward. And we kind of need this to sit between these two pieces in the right spot. So let's just make sure that this is actually working. So it seems okay. It seems like it's sitting on this edge. And all we need to do here is do a Boolean operation as usual. But we also want to make a copy of this piece for the detail that's going to be revealed. So Shift D to copy, right mouse button to paste in place. And then we can just do an insert here and move this out. And then move this whole piece in and turn off wireframe for this. And then we're going to select these two pieces. Bring this back, bring my reference plane back. And for these two pieces here, we're going to change the pivot to the center of this. And in order to be able to do that, we can just go to left view and do an insert and then merge at center. And then we're going to select these two, Shift Alt S, and actually we can I guess we could join them for now. So let's go out of pivot manipulation mode. Control J to join them, Shift Alt S, move the pivot here. And then we're just going to rotate this around. Shift D, hold down R, and then rotate this down 75. Shift D, hold down R, rotate this over. Or actually we're just gonna mirror, so Control J to join, Alt X. And you can see that the axis is misaligned, and that's because we have a transform on these pieces. So let me just actually escape, and then let me also merge these windows back together. So with these two pieces, you can see that it has a rotation value. So what we're going to do is Control A, apply all, and now when we do Alt X, we can just mirror it over, and then apply modifiers. And then go to face mode, press P, separate by loose parts. And now we have all these individual pieces again. And then we can do our booleans. I think we need 2 copies of the cutter objects. So Shift D, right mouse button to paste in place. Control J to join them, and then select this and do boolean. But I don't want to do boolean on all of them. I just want to use a boolean on this outer shell. So Alt G to select linked, and then P, separate by selection, and then this Control minus, and it's not working as expected. So let's see why that is. Let's look at the face orientation. Face orientation is right, and this obviously is an open face, so it's probably got something to do with that. So let's try this first. Let's separate this piece and then see if it does it with one. Nope. So what we're going to do is we're just going to close this face here on the inside. So let's turn off face orientation, and then right mouse button N to make a new face. And then we're just going to join the vertices down here, join them down here, and let's see if this helps us. So this and this, Control minus, and there we go. Now it works. And then we can also do the same for the lower object. Keep creating my stuff in the reference plane group, which is not where I want them to live, but that's okay for now. So subtract here, subtract here. Okay, now it's bugging out again. Let's see if it worked over here. So this worked fine. Oh, that's because we already did it on the 4 pieces. So that's fine with me. We can just do apply modifiers here and can leave it at this for now, but just get rid of this face in the middle here and the face at the bottom. And we're probably also not going to use any of these faces, but I'm going to leave it in for now. And then we can select the other 4 Boolean objects. Control J to join them, and I'm going to do Boolean here, and that worked out reasonably well. Apply modifiers, and there we go. Now we have these pieces sitting in here, which is exactly what I wanted. Let's join these together, and then we're going to move this to the core group and apply our bevel medium material to it. And we can also do smooth shading and set up auto smooth and hide the reference planes. And this is looking really nice. We're also not getting any overlap, which is great. Maybe what we can do is actually move these in a little bit, maybe so that they kind of like match this edge here, or maybe even a little bit more forward. And then we can also do a bevel if we want. Control B. Honestly, I don't think we need it. I think the bevel shader is going to take care of it anyway. Yeah, this is looking fine. So I'm going to leave it at that. Let's add more detail, and I want to have a panel line that kind of like goes around here. so that I can have another material here. So the easiest way to do that is bring back our old cutters. And then I want to duplicate this one. Shift D, right mouse button to paste in place, and then Shift select this guy and Control F to isolate. And then look at it from the front, scale it in, and then we can do shortest path select, Alt E, extrude faces along normal, and maybe delete this edge here so that we get a bit of a different angle. Delete this, and Control B and C to clamp overlap, and then we can do Alt X, mirror it over, Alt X, mirror it down, and apply modifier. And now we can do an intersection, or actually a slash, Control minus, set this to slash, add modifier, apply modifier, add modifier, apply modifier. And now we have this and this, and you can see the geometry was too messy, so the Boolean couldn't fill it in, but not to worry. So what we're going to do is just get rid of the right side, and then just in vertex mode double click to select the outer edge, and then deselect all of this, E to extrude, and then we can mirror this over, and also mirror this over. There we go. And we need to do the same thing for in here. Extrude, and then mirror it over. And that's all we need. Merge by distance. And this geometry is pretty messy, but not to worry, it's just a high poly. It only needs to render fine, it doesn't need to be good geometry, so as long as it renders and bakes fine, that's all I want from it. So I'm not worrying about any topology or n-gons or anything like that. So there we go. Turn off the cutters, and if we switch to rendered, we should be getting a nice panel line here. Yep. Starting to shape up really nice. Let's apply all and mirror these guys over so that they're on both sides. And then one thing I wanted to do as well is kind of make this a little deeper here. So just select all of these vertices and move this in maybe here and mirror this over. So we're getting a bit more of a more pronounced shape. Let's take a look at our reference planes again and see what we're still missing. So we still need these guys, and it's essentially the same as the pieces I've already used on the body top. So if I bring this back, you can see we have them here. So you can either duplicate those guys or bring them back in from the kitbash file, which is what I'm going to do. File, append, and then grenade detailer 1. There we go. And let's take a look at this. And I think I actually need to move this down just a tad. Maybe do around somewhere here. And then we need the Boolean geometry, but we can create that in a second. So first we're gonna put the pivot here. Shift D. Let's do this again. Shift D, R, X, hold down Control. 130, Shift D, R, X, 130. And let's bring back the rest. Let's see what the intersections look like. It's getting a little close there, so maybe actually move these down just a tad. And we could even move this back up again. And then we need to adjust the pivot again, Shift-D, R, and 130, and then one more time. Okay, let's do it the other way around. My brain is freezing right now. Negative 130. Okay, there we go. Looking good. And we can join them together. Control J. And then we need these faces back here. Right mouse button N to make a new face. P, separate selection. Select the faces, extrude them back. Move them out. Snap them here. And then let's see if we can do this without any problems. So this we need to separate. So separate by selection. And then we need 3 copies. Subtract, subtract, subtract. There we go. There's our openings. This worked out really well, actually. I'm pretty happy with it. No arrows, so we can apply modifiers. And then bring this to the other side. Do this again. I just messed up there, so let's see what's going on here. Oh, this is still one piece, I guess, so delete this. Alt-X, add modifier, apply modifier. Same here, Alt-X, add modifier, apply modifier, and then here too. And there we go. Same for here, Control A, Alt-X, mirror it over. And this should be it. For the grenade, we can apply a bevel material to it. Take a look in the rendered view. Looking nice, I'm liking the bevel we're getting. And again, all these materials will be tweaked later on, but that's it for the geometry for the grenade. That's pretty quick. Some really fun techniques in there, in my opinion, especially like the UV deformation. So hopefully that's useful to you guys. So before we go ahead and start on the low poly, let's add some floater geometry to add even more detail to our mesh. First, I want to move the grenade detail to the core group, and then hide the reference planes and hide the core, and only look at body top, body bottom, and the leg piece. And we're going to append the floating geometry. So go to File, Append, and look for Floaters 01. And then you can see we now have a bunch of floating geometry in our scene. It's literally just one piece of geometry duplicated over and over, this one here. So let's move this out, and then we're going to separate by selection and center pivot. We're actually going to center the pivot here, and then go to pivot mode, go to move mode, and move this in a little bit. And by placing the pivot here, this will be the offset from the surface that the floater is going to have. And I'm going to show you a couple of methods on how to place these pieces. So go to rotation mode and make sure that you align the piece like this in the beginning. So you want it to be facing upwards, and then we want to make sure that all transformation values are reset. So rotation and scale should be at 0. So rotation at 0, scale at 1. And then we can use the snapping tool, and we're going to set this to snap to face, median, and align rotation to target. And then I can press G and hold down Control, and you can see it will place the floater on top of the face I'm hovering on, and it will also adjust the rotation. So as you can see here, it will properly adjust the rotation to the orientation of the face. And it also depends a little bit on the camera, as you can see. Like sometimes when you come in from a weird angle, it doesn't necessarily work as well, but for for the most part, it's doing a pretty decent job. And you can always reset these values here. So you can set this to 0, set this to 0, actually set this to 0, set this to 0, do it again, and then try to move it over in ways where it like adjusts to the angle that you want. So just play around with this a little bit. It's pretty powerful and it just allows you to place things nicely. And then you can also use the values here to kind of like rotate them. And yeah, that's how you would position these. And instead of you having to do it manually with all these little pieces, I'm just giving them to you so that you don't have to spend the time doing that. So that should save you a little bit of time. But what I want to do is I want to organize these a little bit. So basically put them in groups. So let's separate this. Let's see where this is in right now. Where did it place it? Okay, it's in the leg group, which is where I want it to be. And then let's take a look at the other ones. Okay, all of these go, well, these ones go to the body bottom group. So let's separate these. And put these in the body bottom group. And these guys go into the body top group. And you can hold down left mouse button and go up and down, and the outliner will scroll, which is cool. And with that, we should have the pieces aligned correctly. So let's check. Body top. Okay, so these ones actually, there's some inner ones here which you probably haven't seen. Let's see, let's hide body top. Well, they're actually in the body top group, which is the problem. So they are here. So these ones have to go to the body bottom as well. So let's move them out, move them to body bottom, hide the body top group, and there we go now. So here's these floaters. Maybe we should actually move these a little closer to the surface. So let me just do that really quick. Delete these guys, center pivot, and then we're just going to move that in to somewhere around here. Apply all, Shift-D, R, X, Shift-D, R, X. And now they are a little closer to the surface, and we can join them with these guys. Control J. And they are in the body bottom. These guys are in the leg group. And that's it. So now everything is properly organized and we have those floaters, which is a good thing, and we can keep going.